All right, we are back on this President's Day, Monday. Hope you have a day off. If you do, we appreciate you hanging. If not, get through that work day, and we'll help you get through that work day. All right, joining us right now, you can catch him on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank, and you could follow him on Twitter at DZingaro, NBCS. David, what's up, my man? How you doing?
Yo, what's going on, guys? How are you?
Dave, all good,
the
man.
World Traveler.
All good.
How you doing,
All
sir?
good.
I'm doing well.
Dave, what's the excursion this offseason? Where are we headed, man? Or have we already done it?
No, I don't have a big thing planned. I was in West Texas for a few days. It was fun. I was just down there in Big Bend National Park and did a little bit of hiking, and it was a quick trip. I don't have anything big planned yet.
You're in Tone's neck of the woods, man.
Yeah,
He's
I got a quick question for you,
Where
Dave.
are you, Tone? Outside of San Antonio?
I'm about an hour away from Austin.
Okay.
I'm about an hour away from Austin. Yeah. But quick question for you, Dave. I mean, how do you come up with the places that you want to go? I mean, do you have like a Rolodex of just like places? Like, do you have a map in the house where you just have pins and you just throw a dart and you just go there? I mean, how do you go about picking the places where you go and you travel in the off season?
It's fine. Like, I want to go everywhere. So but I have like trips in my head that I want to do. I've been on this kick. Like, it's funny since COVID, like, you obviously couldn't leave the country for a while. So I started crossing off national parks.
Okay.
I've kind of liked doing that. So a lot of my trips the last few years have just been going to see some national parks. But that was really just because I couldn't leave the country. Like all you could, but the rules were so crazy. And then you had to worry about like if you can't get back in. And that was my biggest fear is like if you have to pass the test to get back in, you can get like a false positive, be stuck somewhere. So, but now that's starting to lighten. So I'd like to get out of the country a little bit.
Okay. All right. Perhaps, soon, you got to make that move, Dave.
Perhaps Brazil. Maybe Brazil.
I think when's the best time for you? I'm assuming would be like June before camp starts. And then that's when everything kind of settles down with the, off-season moves.
It's really crazy. That's really the only dead time of the NFL schedule. It's after, the Eagles haven't even had a mandatory mini camp the last couple of years. Curious to see if they do one this year. They should. But like after that mandatory camp, which is like mid-June, and then training camp normally starts late July. That's really the only dead period of the NFL calendar. It used to be like a February window, but the season got pushed back a week.
Right. Right. No, it's a good point. Well, let's talk about it, Dave, because the big story the last couple of weeks has been Hassan Reddick and what happens there. We know what the sequencing of this was. There was the initial report from Ian Rappaport and, the NFL Network who, said they have given him permission to seek a trade. And then there was the clarification on Hassan's part saying, look, I didn't request the trade. There is a difference, right? I still love to be here, but do I want to get paid? I'm paraphrasing him, but you know what I mean. Can they come, in your estimation, to some kind of happy medium with him staying here, or do you feel like it's more likely he's out of here?
Oh, I think there's a possibility where they figure this out, and it really became like a semantics thing. When a player is given permission to seek a trade, it's not really like that. It's not like his agent's going to team X and saying, hey, what would you give the Eagles in return? Like, that's not what they're doing. They're really just gauging his value to the other teams in the league. And it's like, and we've seen the Eagles do this before with Slay and Fletcher Cox, where it's, hey, they want to raise. We're not really seeing eye to eye on the money. Go see if you can get it somewhere else. And if you can, fine, and then it needs to work for us. And I think that's what happened here. Hassan Reddick is underpaid. He's outperformed that contract, which was low at the time. I mean, when he signed it, I think a lot of us thought, wow, that's a steal for a guy who's gotten double-digit sacks at that point in back-to-back seasons with two different teams, two different systems, $15 million a year. I thought it was a good deal then. 2 years later, it's certainly on the cheap end of things. He deserves to be at least in the 20s. I look at it, if it's like a 2-year, $45 million extension, that makes sense to me. Get him over the 20 range. Don't get him above 25. where those elite players are, and that's tough to stomach. But yeah, he certainly does deserve a raise, and something's got to give there. There's just no way he comes back and plays. I've heard people suggest that. I don't think you want that. I think that leads to a contentious relationship. He's not happy with the deal. He wasn't happy with the deal this year, but he knew he didn't have any leverage with 2 years left on the contract. So he shows up, he plays well for the most part, and now it's time to revisit it. So I think there is an avenue where they figure this out. On the flip side of it, he's going to turn 30 in September, and I think there is a little concern when you're starting to pay elite money for a guy who's a little bit long in the tooth. On the flip side of that, he might still be an ascending player because he got to play purely edge rusher so much later in his career than a lot of guys.
You know, David, it's so interesting. And, I tend to agree with you. I think he is underpaid, right? But, hear me out on this, right? What do you say to those people who say, well, okay, he's underpaid, but is he in that $20+ million range? He's an undersized edge rusher. When the new contract takes effect, he's probably going to be 31 years old. Will there be a team, an NFL team, not just the Philadelphia Eagles, because, again, he could potentially be traded. Is there an NFL team that's going to be willing, like you said, to pay an edge rusher who's going to be 30, 31 when that contract takes effect? On top of that, he's undersized at the position. And when you think about guys who are making the big money at that role, you see guys 6'4", 6'5", 6'3", 260, 70 pounds. There's a prototype for that position. And Haason Reddick, just from a measurable standpoint, doesn't necessarily fit that. What do you say to those who question his size in correlation to his pay scale?
Yeah, the size to me doesn't matter as much. Now, you can say that because of his size, he's a limited player, and maybe that's a little true because he is a speed rusher. But I don't know, man. The production, to me, speaks for itself. And I don't think he's as good as some of those top guys. I don't think he's Myles Garrett. I don't think he's TJ Watt. But we're talking about the elite of the elite there. I don't think he's going to touch them in terms of pay scale either. But yeah, he's a double-digit sack guy. He had 11 this year, and he really got them in 10 games. So you can look at it and say he had a down season. And I know that when you look at the numbers at the end of the year, he did. But I'll make the excuses for him. The thumb injury at the beginning of the year clearly hampered him. And then at the end of the season, I don't know how you judge anyone on that. It was it was just such a mess.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I don't know if I'm anyone on that team. I go, forget those last 5 games. What the heck? That doesn't count. Obviously it counts, but that'd be if I'm their agent, be like, nothing. No, you had Matt Patricia calling the plays. That you can't count that against me. It is tricky. I understand what you're saying, but the thing that scares me more, and I think that would scare some other teams more, is less than the size. It's that he's such a speed rusher.
Yeah.
And if that drops off, he's clearly not the same player, right?
Right. And he can't lean on the size either, right?
Yeah, so it's get off, it's speed. And if that falls off, then he's no longer a special player. And I think that is the legitimate concern, more so than his speed. Or more so than his size, I should say.
If I can quickly follow up, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
In that case, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, because again, a trade is on the table. Let's say he does get traded. Let's say they can't come to a conclusion. What do you believe Haason Reddick's value is in terms of compensation?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think the Eagles are going to ask for a 1 because you got to start somewhere. They're not going to get a 1. I think it's probably a 2 and a day 3 pick. I think they're going to ask for a 1. They won't get it. They'll ask for 2 2s. I think that's probably too rich because remember, whatever team trades for him has to sign him, and they take on the risk with that contract extension. I could see a 2 and a 3. I don't think that's crazy. I think there is some precedent for a deal like that. Yeah, I think you got to get a 2 back. He's one of your best players.
Yeah,
he might be your best defensive player. So you can't give this guy away. That's where I would start.
All right, let me lean into that what you just said, and also the leverage thing from his standpoint, Dave. They lack talent on that side of the ball. It's a bad defense. Let's call it like it is. I mean, it's a defense that, from a scoring standpoint, a takeaway standpoint, a third down. You know, we could run through it all. We all know what it is. They're bad. They can't lose him, in my opinion. Like, you're not rebuilding, you're retooling on the fly. To lose your best player on that side of the ball would be a big loss. I think he sits pretty well from a leverage standpoint, at least my opinion.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, and you know, the tricky part of this is Josh Sweat, because he's entering the final year of his deal too.
Right.
And Haason Reddick's a better player right now, but Sweat's younger. He's probably not going to cost as much. So if you're looking at it from Howie's perspective and thinking, well, if I can only extend one of these guys, it might make sense to extend the homegrown guy who is younger, considerably younger. But then the problem with Josh Sweat is, I think, and this is unfair to him, I get that, but in the back of my mind with Josh Sweat is always going to be that knee. And I know it's unfair to him. I know he hates to talk about it, but every time you invest significant money in him, I wonder about his shelf life. And I understand that's unfair to him, but if I'm the team, that it's in the back of my mind too. And I mean, Sweat in his first huge snap season fell off a cliff. You know, he was asked to play so much, and he really was not productive at all down the stretch. And even before the Matt Patricia games, like he started to fall off before that. The guy we haven't talked about enough is Nolan Smith. He kind of was under the radar for most of his rookie season, but it was a really disappointing season for a guy who was a first-round pick. I know he wasn't the high first-round pick. Jalen Carter got a lot of the attention, and he played really well for a lot of the season. But, I mean, man, Nolan Smith didn't do much of anything.
Dave, he's treated like he was like a fifth-rounder, honestly. And he's fortunate that there was such a disaster, or else he would have been getting crushed. He had one sack.
And it was a sack that, kind of fell to him. You know, I think it's fair to wonder about him. And look, you're not writing him off. Certainly, that's unfair after one season. But there was so much hype around him in training camp last year. I mean, we're talking about man, could Nolan Smith be the more impactful rookie out of these two? It was a question. We were talking about it because he looked so good in training camp. And man, he was just almost non-existent. He should have been the third guy in that rotation. He was fifth until they traded Derek Barnett. Or cut him, right? They cut Barnett.
Cut him, cut him.
When Barnett left. So, he was behind Derek Barnett and Brandon Graham, and then he was still behind 35-year-old Brandon Graham, who was giving them good snaps. But, I was disappointed to not see Nolan Smith get more burn on defense this year, because he was a guy that if they would have stayed at 10 overall and taken him, everyone would have gone, all right.
Right.
It wouldn't have been a shocker.
True. It's true.
So, they need more from him.
To your point about Nolan Smith, right? You know, I look at his situation like this. I felt like the team didn't really do the best of their ability to develop him or get him snaps. Now, granted, he's dealt with the shoulder, all those kind of things. He's a very raw player, relies on speed. He got swallowed up a lot on the edge by tackles, but I don't know. Again, year one, none of us are indicting him. I want to make that clear. None of us are doing that. But I guess how much pressure is on Nolan Smith and this front office to validate that pick? Again, with Haason Reddick going through this contract situation, they knew this was coming. And the reason they drafted Nolan was because they wanted to get ahead of this. Clearly, that wasn't the case. And because of Nolan's lackluster rookie season, Haason Reddick has more leverage now. Speak on that narrative.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, because if Nolan Smith had an encouraging rookie season, I think we're looking at the Haason Reddick thing a little differently. We might even be looking at Haason as but in 2 years, he might be blocking Nolan Smith, who might be a really good player by then. But I don't think we saw enough from Nolan as a rookie to think that. So it's tricky. It felt like he got away with a bad season, right? There was so much going on across the board where everyone's watching Jalen Carter, everyone's watching this collapse, and they have a first-round pick who couldn't get playing time. I remember back in October asking Sean Desai about Nolan Smith and him saying, "Oh, the snaps are going to come, or we're gonna get him some playing time." Didn't happen. You're always curious about if they were going to start using him as kind of like an off-ball blitzer, like if they were going to find some unique ways to get him involved and they didn't, it's really back-to-back years. They should have found ways to get a Georgia linebacker on the field and they didn't do it. Obviously a different position, but like Nakobe 2 years ago, you're like, I want to see this kid play. He didn't play. And then last year, Nolan Smith as a rookie, like I want to see this kid play. And he just didn't. The difference is one was a 3rd round pick, one was a 1st rounder.
How, in your estimation, Dave, I'm talking about the defensive side of the ball. How difficult is it to going to be to even get them to the point where they're solid? Like how tough a task is that in your estimation?
I think Fangio is going to help. Just having an adult in the room who knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
I don't think you bring in Vic Fangio to have the best defense in the league. I think you bring in Vic Fangio to steady this thing a little bit and say, hey, we need to have at least an average defense. And I have a pretty high level of confidence he'll be able to do that. I agree with you. I don't think the talent on defense is great. And there are a lot of question marks. You know, you look at it and 2 of the big building blocks on defense are Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, who I think were both good at times. Carter was great at times as a rookie. You need consistent play from those 2 guys because Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham were 2 of the better players last year.
That's certainly in that Tampa game.
Yeah, they showed up, and I give them credit for that.
Yep.
I think Slay was fine last year, but he's going to be another year older. I think they have some talent, right? Like I think Keely Ringo's talented. I think Sidney Brown is talented once he gets back from that ACL, but I don't think you have a ton that you can really rely on. So I know you can rely on Vic Fangio to at least understand what he's doing and bring a baseline level of competence to this defense, which they really lacked for a lot of last year. So I think that'll help. I don't think they can completely ignore some positions like they did last year. Like I think at linebacker, you at least need to have a plan B if Nakobe Dean can't play. At safety, you know, it can't be Justin Evans. Like it has to be someone you can kind of count on. You know, if I'm them, I'm calling the Broncos and seeing if you can get a Pro Bowler cut loose there. You know, I think that's a position in this defense that's really important too. And I think some of the draft picks will be on that side of the ball. So I agree with you. I think on offense, you kind of know your big pieces. On defense, it's a little more in flux, and that's scary. But you know, this is a little bit by design. I think you want to have an elite offense. If you're Jeff Lurie and you're Howie Roseman, and you have to pick one side of the ball to be elite, you pick the offense, and then you try to get by on defense. I think that's the way they're looking at it, and that makes sense. But there are more questions on defense for sure.
You know, Dave, I want to pick your brain since we're talking about Vic Fangio. I want to ask you about Kellen Moore. He spent time with the Cowboys, with the Chargers. He's dealt with mainly drop back guys in his career as a coordinator. What's your level of confidence and or concern when it comes to the marriage between him, Nick Sirianni, and Jalen Hurts? Because there's a lot riding on this upcoming season, especially with that first year of Jalen Hurts' contract kicking in.
Yeah, you know what's funny? Jalen Hurts was a drop back passer last year. Like it was such a weird thing to me because they still acted with their play calls that he was a running quarterback. He wasn't. I mean, when he took off, he wasn't effective. He was protecting himself, which I don't blame him for. But that part was wonky to me last year. Was that they were still like counting on this +1 with the QB run game, and they didn't have it anymore. So you ended up like behind the 8 ball a little bit when you're talking about those things. So I think they got to figure out what Jalen Hurts is in terms of the run game. Is it going to be a part of his game or not? And if it's not, that's okay. I understand that, but you got to figure that out because you're like kind of hurting yourself when you're calling these plays and you're expecting him to get that +1 advantage, and teams
Did you sense indecision between the coaches and the quarterback?
Dave, was it him or was it what they wanted him to do, the hesitancy?
I don't know. And that's a big part of it. I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think they certainly wanted him to protect himself more, and he did, but he also didn't look like the same runner he was the previous year, and that's more anecdotal. I don't know what the know, like the GPS tracking. I don't know if they're saying he was as fast. He didn't look as fast. I think that's pretty fair by the eye test. He didn't look as fast last year. I don't think he was as much of a threat to take off. And we saw defenses honor that less, right? Like a big part of their offense, the 2 previous seasons, was they have a quarterback who can beat you with his legs, and they didn't have that last year, which is okay. Like I think they have a good enough offense without him running. I think he has improved enough as a pocket passer to be that, but you got to figure that out. And I like Kellen Moore. I think it would, I know a little off top. I like Kellen Moore. I think that's a good hire. It's funny how coordinator candidates kind of get hot and cold. Like this is a guy who was definitely going to be a head coach in a year, and now he's on his 3rd coordinator job in 3 years. So it's you never really know, but I think it's going to bring some stability to that side too. And the Nick Sirianni offense was brutal to watch last year. It was almost a bigger problem than the defense, because offense, they were supposed to be elite and they weren't. You know, that needed to be a top 3 offense, and it wasn't. And a big part of the problem was just, and I think Nick heard this from Jeff Lurie at that end of the year meeting, because he kept talking about fresh ideas when he mentioned hiring a new offensive coordinator. They had no fresh ideas. It was like they tried to just do the same exact thing they did the year before and expected it to work the same. And that's just not the way this league works.
Do you, all right, just stay on that for a minute, Dave. Do you believe that he will kind of stay out of it? I'm not saying he doesn't have input, but he is not planning it like he did, scheming it like he did during the week. Do you believe that is the case? And how challenging will that adjustment be for him, where he really is a CEO, like hands off, in every phase, not as much to do with the offense?
Yeah, it's going to be tricky because he is an offensive coach and he takes pride in that. And, it was during last year where I think it was actually, I asked him why he didn't make a change at offensive coordinator. And he said, well, this is my offense. They hired me to be an offensive mind. Maybe they did, but that's not why they're keeping him, right? They're keeping him because they like his leadership qualities. They like his ability to manage a team. They clearly don't like his ability as an offensive coach as much, because they just brought in a veteran to kind of take over that side of the football. So it's going to take some humility from him, but we have seen that from him before, right? You think back to 21 when he hands over play calling to Shane Steichen, and then continues that with Brian Johnson a couple years later. So we've seen that humility before. So I think it can work. I don't think he's going to be completely hands off with the offense. That would be foolish too, honestly. I know everyone's down on the offense, and they should be. It was bad last year, but they have done some things well, right? Like, you don't completely throw everything out. He does understand offensive football. I think he can help, but I think what you do worry about is like a power struggle on that side of the football. So you really need to have clearly defined roles for the coaching staff. And if it's Kellen Moore's offense, you got to let him run it, right? You got to let him call the plays. You can't have too much oversight. Now, there has to be some going back and forth, because Nick's the guy who decides to go for it on 4th down. Like, that's a very simple scenario. But like, if he's deciding to go for it on 4th down, then he kind of has to be a part of the play calls leading up to that 4th down, right? So it has to work in unison. But I know he joked at that year-end press conference that maybe he'll go spend some time in the defensive meetings. No, I mean, Vic Fangio is going to kick him out of those meetings pretty quickly. So he's going to have to be more involved on the offense. And I think that does make sense. And he keeps Kevin Patullo, by the way, which we haven't talked about a lot. I think Kevin Patullo kind of becomes a really important piece to bridge the gap from the previous offense to this one as the passing game coordinator. I don't know what it's going to look like. I think that's one of the things I'm really excited to see once we get to training camp.
Dave, we talked about Jalen Hurts' running ability and how important it is to the flow of the offense. In 2022, Jalen Hurts infamously, considering himself to be a triple threat, right? The running, the passing, and the decision making, right? I want to throw some numbers at you and just get your instant reaction to it. In 2022, 58% of Jalen Hurts' passing yards came by way of the RPO and the play action combined. 58% in 2022. In 2023, that dropped significantly to a 29%. 29% of Jalen Hurts' passing yards coming by way of the RPO and the play action. They basically cut his play action and RPO production in half. Now, granted, The coaches didn't do much of anything to adjust the offense. But on top of that, teams caught on to what they were doing. When you hear those metrics, how much do you attribute that to Jalen Hurts not maximizing his opportunities? How much do you attribute that to Nick Sirianni just not doing a good job with evolving the RPO blueprint? How do you respond when you hear that metric?
Yeah, to me, like to me, it probably means way less RPOs. Their play action game hasn't really been there anyway. But in terms of RPOs, like at times it would work. And those are nice kind of simple reads for a quarterback. And I thought Jalen Hurts handled them pretty well. I think it does kind of speak to what we were saying earlier is like, if he's not a threat to run the ball, it kind of takes away one of the elements of those, whether it's a read option or sometimes like the read option RPO stuff, the numbers get wonky because you don't know what's what. But I agree that there was less of that certainly this year. I think there are some reasons for that. I think at times we saw them get themselves into trouble with penalties on those plays. We'd see offensive linemen downfield pretty quick, and those were getting called at a pretty high rate against them, even in the Super Bowl season. Like that was killing some drives. So I think they did scale them back a little bit. I don't know how that's going to blend with what Kellen Moore wants to do, because you're right. The offense last year, it lacked a lot of those elements. And it was basically like everything was just tough. It felt like they were playing uphill every time they were on offense. And I think a lot of that was just they made it tougher on themselves than they needed to make it. And that's not to say like Jalen Hurts couldn't carry the team at times. I thought there were even some games he played really well in, but they made his life really difficult last year. Like the degree of difficulty was raised so much. And I'd like to see Kellen Moore get him some layups. I think there are ways to scheme a guy open here and there. Motion is one of those ways. Like I know Nick seemingly just doesn't want it, but there's a reason that the other 31 teams in the league use the motion rate higher than the Eagles, right? Like there are really valuable parts of that. So I think Kellen Moore is going to bring that. And a lot of it is just finding ways to get your quarterback some layups. And I know Doug Peterson once said there aren't layups. There are layups in this league. You got to find them. You got to lower the level of difficulty. And that's kind of what I want to see from Kellen Moore.
Dave, let me ask you about the NFC, and appreciate you giving us a couple of minutes here. I the obvious thing is Niners 1, probably Lions 2, if in fact you feel that way. Where do the Eagles fall after that in your estimation? Or give me your order, so to speak. I don't need 10 of them, but like, what are they still in your top 3, 4, 5? Where are they at this point?
I think they're still top 5. I think the Niners still deserve to be there, although it wouldn't shock me to see a pretty big drop off from them. Tough. We've seen here, right? It's tough to lose a Super Bowl and bounce back. So I think they could definitely be in line for a disappointing season. I think the Lions are still a really good team. I think the Eagles are right there with the Cowboys, and look, the Cowboys, they're good in the regular season and they collapse. It's just
it's always going to be they're like the Sixers. It's always going to be the question once you get to the postseason.
Yeah. So I think they're right there with the Cowboys, but I think they're a top 5 team in the NFC.
Dave, if I could squeeze one last one out of you, last one from me, man. I appreciate you for always taking the time for us. With all the dysfunction that happened, with the collapse on defense and the eventual collapse on offense, knowing what we know about, Brent Covey coming up, saying things about the disconnect between players and coaches, and the front office completely gutting Nick Sirianni's coaching staff. When you couple all that together, has trust in Nick Sirianni been compromised, not only with the front office, but also with the team and just the city as a whole?
I mean, at the city, certainly, but that might not matter as much, right? Like it's about the people in that building. What I will say for him is the players really do like him. They want to play hard for him, which sounds hokey, but it matters. Ultimately, like players just want a coach they can trust to get the most out of them, to help them win games, to help them get paid, right? Like that's at its simplest form. With Nick Sirianni, I think they do trust him. I think they do like him. A lot of it's going to be like these new coordinators coming in to kind of run their sides of the football. How much do they trust them? And how does that all work together with the coaching staff? I don't think we know that answer yet. I think Sirianni's leash is certainly shorter, right, than it was coming off a Super Bowl appearance. But the tricky thing here is that it's tougher to judge him now because you could judge him on the offense.
It's not as direct, so to speak. Yeah,
exactly. It's going to like last year you look for failure and success. It was like, okay, obviously the team completely collapsing at the end of the season, you pin on the head coach, but the offensive struggles, it was easy to say it's on him. A little trickier now, right? Like, because you have an offensive coordinator on that side of the ball who's going to get the credit and the blame depending on how things go. And you have such a veteran defensive coordinator who's going to get the credit and the blame for that side of the football. So how do we judge Nick Sirianni? Is it only on wins and losses? Is it on the way his team play? Like, right? It's a little trickier to figure out.
Is that by design? Do you think it's by design?
What do you mean?
Do you think, to put it plainly, do you think they're trying to hide Nick Sirianni at this point?
No, I don't think they're trying to hide him from scrutiny. I think they're trying to have a better football team. And I think they looked at it and thought, well, this guy can't run the offense anymore, which, yeah, is a little bit of an indictment on him. But I do believe them when they say they value some of the things Sirianni brings. Like if it's his leadership qualities, like I think they do value that. And it's a model that can work. It's rare, right? But we've seen, like we all know, gosh, how many times we've gone through the examples of Harbaugh and Tomlin and Dan Campbell. Like it can work. But you have to, like, is Nick Sirianni that type of coach? We'll find out.
Yep. Dave, keep it up, man.
Thank you so much for your time, Dave. Truly appreciate you.
Yeah, we do. We always do. And check him out. D Zingaro NBCS on Twitter is where you can check him out. He's got the Eagle Eye podcast with Reuben Frank and, of course, all of his works. And he throws links up there to his works as well on Twitter, but at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Dave, good stuff, man. Enjoy. Keep up the good work. Thanks, you
guys. Take care.
All right, you got it. That's Dave Zingaro. Tone, let's sneak away for a second, come right back, and we'll look at some other players who, you know, may fall into that category of being gone. Some interesting names here, and we'll throw some names out there that they're rumored to be at least involved in or in the mix for. All right, so we'll dig into all that when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Tone DeShields, Rob Ellis hanging with you on this Monday. All right, let's talk about Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group, because knowing who to trust can be critical. And I'm right there in the front of the line when it comes to your finances. But I can tell you from personal experience that someone that I believe in and I put my money where my mouth is Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group, whether it's retirement planning, 401k review, insurance review. It's another resource that Jim can help you with. I've entrusted my IRA, my 401k rollovers with Jim, and I couldn't be any happier. You will be too. Give him a call, 610-996-4751, 610-996-4751. You can also email him as well, Murray, Murray,